So we don't talk enough about heavy metal on this channel. Sure, I might reference a fair few bands and albums I really enjoy in my videos, but I haven't done many metal-specific videos for a long while, and that's honestly something that I really want to change. Seeing as heavy music is a core part of my identity as a media connoisseur, I figured we could start bringing heavy metal videos back into the rotation, starting with today's video about Gojira, who are one of my favorite bands. Forming in 1996, Gojira, originally named Godzilla before being legally required to change their name in 2001, are a French progressive technical death metal four-piece consisting of guitarist and vocalist Gabrielle Duplantier, his brother and drummer Mario Duplantier, guitarist Christian Andrew, and bassist Jean-Michel, who have had zero lineup changes since 1998. As a group, Gojira are renowned for their ferocious live shows, bludgeoning guitar riffs, precise drumming, and lyrical themes regarding environmentalism, because yes, eco-friendly death metal is real, which is befitting for a band named after a kaiju who is an unstoppable force of nature that was unwittingly created by humanity's hubris, just like climate change. Furthermore, Gojira's career spans a couple decades. In the first half of their career, they were incredibly obscure, but were eventually able to gain traction due to their exceptional and energetic live shows and through the quality of their music, and by now in 2022, they are a force to be reckoned with in the heavy metal world, recognized as one of the active greats of the genre. And with that, I wanted to discuss Gojira's exemplary 7-album catalog. I desired any reason to laud this band further. So without further ado, here is a list ranking Gojira's discography from worst to best. Starting at the top, number 7, The Link. Let me say up front that as of this recording, there is no such thing as a bad Gojira album. All their LPs have their own merits and positive qualities and have their own reasons to listen to them. But if there were to be a Gojira album that can be described as the least good, then that album is 2003's The Link, no relation. As the band's second album, The Link sees Gojira taking the raw heaviness of their debut LP, Terra Incognita, and fusing that with a bit more artistic focus in terms of its indigenous music inspirations that can be heard throughout the whole record, which on the one hand is pretty interesting to discuss, but unfortunately this doesn't always make for a compelling listening experience. While don't get me wrong, The Link has a few stellar tracks in the hard-hitting Remembrance, the opening title track, and Embrace the World, most of the music really blurs together amidst Joe Duplantier's screams and the heavy riffs, and out of all Gojira albums, The Link is honestly just the least essential and the least memorable. Though with that said, The Link does have a saving grace, mostly because it was the band's first attempt at creating a wholly thematic piece of music. See, where Gojira's debut album, Terra Incognita, had a lot of memorable tracks, The Link is the first time we see the band try and be ambitious with their musical themes and create a cohesive message over the course of an album. And while The Link stumbles quite a bit in its execution, it did lay the groundwork for later major creative successes, and for that, I will always be grateful for The Link, even though, as stated before, it is undoubtedly Gojira's worst album. Number 6, Terra Incognita. Terra Incognita is Gojira's debut album and sees the band at their most raw and primal. Out of all their LPs, 2001's Terra Incognita has the least amount of thematic focus and doesn't necessarily work as a complementary, cohesive piece. You know, the kind of thing you find in the band's later work. But where it lacks in theme, Terra Incognita more than makes up with great tracks. Whether we are discussing the hard-hitting opener Clone, the monstrous riffs in Lizard Skin, or the methodical, weighty guitar play found in tracks like Space Time and Rise, Terra Incognita has some certified bangers on it, and is well worth a listen for that reason alone. Sure, its great tracks don't complement a grander vision like in later Gojira albums, but Terra Incognita does have a creative fire to it that is very alluring, and honestly, I can't really fault it for that. It's quite a quality record overall, even though there are much better Gojira records. Number 5, The Way of All Flesh. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this one. After all, Gojira's fourth album in 2008's The Way of All Flesh is a fan favorite and is so for many reasons. It has a lot of stellar tracks in opener Ouroboros, the groovy Vacuity, and the heavy as hell Toxic Garbage Island, which is an apt descriptor for my home country right now. Furthermore, the record has some nice stylistic shifts, like in the melodic A Sight to Behold, the heavy riff riffs present in tracks like Yama's Messengers and Wolf Down the Earth are gargantuan, the mix is excellent, the album's themes regarding life and death are incredibly resonant and present a cohesive theme. And to top that all off, the standout track, The Art of Dying, is among Gojira's best and most experimental songs to date. And due to all these reasons, The Way of All Flesh is an essential Gojira album. But with all that being said though, The Way of All Flesh does have one failing, and this mostly has to do with its overall quality compared to other Gojira records. Because honestly, all the rest of the albums that I haven't brought up yet are just as good and are honestly even better than The Way of All Flesh. Mostly because the thing holding The Way of All Flesh back is that its deep cuts, while good, aren't as good as the deep cuts on other albums. In fact, there are a couple of songs in the middle of the album, namely All the Tears and Adoration of None, that are notably inessential compared to the heaviness and inventiveness found on the rest of the LP. They are reruns in my eyes. Yes, even Adoration of None, which features Lamb of God frontman Randy Blythe on vocals in an era before he was a prominent vocalist collaborator. And with that, the two tracks are noticeably less good and prevent The Way of All Flesh from being even greater. And yes, I get that this is a relatively minor critique, but the depth of Gojira's discography means that even a minor criticism like this one can prevent a terrific album like The Way of All Flesh from ranking even higher. That is the high level of Gojira's heavy metal prowess. Number 4, Magma. I have a soft spot for Magma. As Gojira's 6th album, 2016's Magma marked a creative and tonal shift for the band. While the LP retained some of the heavier and memorable death metal riffs, screams, and Mario's formidable drumming prowess found on previous records, seriously, Mario's talent behind the kit proves that drumming should be an Olympic sport, Magma is a more somber experience. After all, the album was created following the death of Joe's and Mario's mother, and is musically structured around the stages of grief, and features a lot more clean vocals as a result. It starts with a downcast melodic Shooting Star, then leads into the more energetic and angry Silvera, The Cell, and Stranded. Following that up is the more experimental and contemplative title track, then the album shifts into anger again with Prey, and then concludes with the overall acceptance of loss with Lowlands and the instrumental closer Liberation. And with that, Magma is honestly really well done and quite beautiful. It takes the listener on a journey with various ups and downs, and is on point with its grief-stricken thematic message. And for that, Magma is arguably Gojira's most thematically cohesive album, even if some fans view Gojira's pivot towards more melodic tendencies as a betrayal to their more technical death metal roots. But they are wrong, obviously, because it's my list and I said so, which makes me right. Number 3, Fortitude. Maybe I'm still high on Fortitude for being the most recent Gojira release. Maybe I'm biased towards liking the album because it's new. But nearly a year on, and after rightfully earning high rankings on many year-end lists, I gotta say 2021's Fortitude is a certified banger of a record. After all, the LP is stacked with memorable songs like Newfound and Another World. It's got some heavy hitters in tracks like Born for One Thing and Sphinx. There are some very experimental tracks like the catchy Amazonia and the spiritual The Chant that utilize indigenous music, all while complementing the band's core heavy metal traits, and the LP has a very infectious theme about rising up and fighting against the world's various injustices, like fascism or the destruction of our planet or those Teletubby heathens. The album is about being resilient in the face of our potential destruction, which isn't surprising for an album called Fortitude. It's literally in the name. And with that, I truly love this album, mostly because there isn't a bad track on it, easily earning its critical acclaim. Hell, the music on Fortitude is so good that the album is easily able to overcome one of its core issues, and how I honestly think Joe's vocal track is a touch too quiet in the mix. It honestly should have been a bit louder. But even with that caveat, Fortitude is still a great record, one of the best albums of 2021, and despite the tough competition, earns its high spot on this list with ease. Number 2, Lanfont Savage. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry. Lanfont Savage, translated to mean The Wild Child, was the last true technical death metal album in Gojira's discography. As the group's 5th release, the 2012 LP featured the layered sound structure, technical death metal core, and featured the philosophical themes about the nature of life, much like their earlier albums like From Mars to Sirius and The Way of All Flesh. But even beyond that, Lanfont Savage also hints at something more, even leaning quite a bit into the melodies and song structures that would be far more present in later albums like Magma and Fortitude. And And honestly, Lanfont Savage has a lot of variety in all 11 of its stellar tracks, whether we are talking about the ferocious opener Explosion, the banger title track, the melodic Born in Winter, the cinematic feel of the axe and Liquid Fire, and the epic scope of The Gift of Guilt, which is possibly my favorite Gojira song, even though the band didn't release it as a single, which is a fucking tragedy. Lanfont Savage is an exemplary record, and one that shows the band simultaneously embracing their tech death roots, all while also making their music grander and adding touches of melody. It is basically the Venn diagram metal album of Gojira's career, and it fucking rules. Number 1, From Mars to Sirius. So here we are. It's this album, From Mars to Sirius, the one with the whales, the one that, for many in the know, was a foregone conclusion to be at the top of this list from the outset. It was predictable. But then again, there's a reason why From Mars to Sirius is so beloved. There's a reason why it's such a fan favorite, and that reason is because it's fan-fucking-tastic. As their third album, 2006's From Mars to Sirius is when Gojira really came into their own. Releasing 3 years after The Link, this LP was the first time that Gojira really fired on all hypersonic cylinders. It's stacked with great tracks and live favorites like the headbangable Backbone, the brutal Heaviest Matter of the Universe, and of course the epic that is Flying Whales. But even beyond the great music, the LP has interesting science fiction themes about space, the changing climate, and alternate dimensions, which is cool and adds to the overall feel of the album. Furthermore, the record is excellently paced, featuring a wide variety of songs and sonic textures that keeps it fresh throughout its runtime. And honestly, all the tracks, whether they be From the Sky or Where Dragons Dwell, are great. Hell, even the album's quote-unquote worst songs are worthy of multiple listens, because they are still really good and complement the better tracks and pace the album out nicely. From the somber opener Ocean Planet to the lamentation of Earth's destruction and the closer Global Warming, From Mars to Sirius is an excellent album and put Gojira on the radar of many metalheads, and to this day, Gojira still has not topped it. And with that, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment telling me your ranking of Gojira's excellent discography. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. $1 a month gives you access to my Discord server and onto these credits, and $5 a month at minimum allows you to make review requests. The link is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, particularly my high tier ones and David, Samantha, Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.